everybody, I've got another video for you, I promised. And I got my little helpers over here. Today, I intend to cover as many of the different hemi ticks as I can. People ask, why does my hemi tick? Well, I've got a load of them, so we'll dive right in. I'm going to save the biggest and the best for last. So y'all just to keep that in mind, bear with me. So we'll dig right in. The very first thing we're going to do here is push rods and rockers. Y'all saw this one on the other video when I tore apart the core motor. So I'm going to go over it again just so all these things are in one video. Thank you, Noah. So you got push rods in here and you got rockers. Hopefully we all know how this works. They sit on the cam, pushes them up and down. So one of the common ones that people condemn an engine over, unfortunately, is this. So on a normal push rod, so there's a nice shiny ball on the push rod and a nice shiny cup inside the rocker. Those two interface and they rub together. They get oil through the rocker shaft, comes down through holes drilled in there and it's plugged up there, and it oils the top of this, pushes oil down to your lifters. So what happens on these guys is every so often one of them will just decide to go bad and you get this kind of wear. Can you see that on your rocker, your push rod and rocker tip? It looks like an eyeball that's going across there. If you see it in person, it looks like somebody took sandpaper and did this number right across the top of that. And the rocker will have matching wear inside the hole there. I've seen some of these where it really shrinks that ball down if you let it go. And it's important to have that sealed up nice and tight because that's the oil going down to your lifter. And it will not pump up your lifter if that interface gets too big. Not to mention, oil can sneak out of there. If one of y'all could find me a head gasket, I need to show you something on there too. So that's what oils your lifter. If you're losing oil out of there, it's not going to keep your lifter pumped up. So there's not very much oil going to it. And unfortunately, most people that want to put a high volume oil pump or something in the motor, it won't do anything for you. That one's out of a small block. See if you can find me a Hemi one.
Your head is cut off.
So there's not a lot of oil getting to them, but it's not because of the volume or the pressure or any of that. But there's a restriction, and there's something you can do about it when you have the head off. Look, hanging up right there over your head. Okay, I think you know what, we got the Hemi head gasket now. So we're back to this. So if you look right here, this little teeny tiny hole, put my thumb over it or something, maybe you can see behind there better. Here, we'll get this. If you look, there's that little tiny hole is where the oil for four of your push rods and rockers comes from. So if you've got a little tiny leak, like what that guy's causing you down here, if you're leaking at one of these, you're going to lose some oil that's intended to pump up your lifters, and it won't pump them up. I've seen sometimes you get 3 or 4 of these on one rocker shaft that are like that, and you're going to have some ticking going on. So that, I've never done it, but you could possibly drill that hole out a little bit bigger to get more oil flow to your top end. I would do that before I would waste my money on high volume oil pumps or any of that stuff. Okay, moving on. Another one that we come across, I do not have an example of it unfortunately, is the valve springs breaking. It was a lot more common on the early cylinder heads from 03 to 08. Probably 95% of the ones I've done have been on there. I've seen a couple of them on the later engines. But the valve spring will break and your valve's just rattling around in there. It can be hitting your piston and making some noise. Usually you can actually get away with just putting a new valve spring on. Sometimes it does bend that piston, but usually not. Sometimes it'll put a little ding on your piston. That's usually not a big deal as long as it didn't slam into it real hard and destroy everything. It'll be pretty obvious. If it does, which that damage will be a lot more obvious like this dropped valve seat. So we're going to take a look at what a dropped valve seat is. Hopefully we don't have a dropped camera too. Thanks guys. So when a valve seat drops, you get damage that looks like this. It's a really hard metal and it will bust up into tiny pieces, go all over the chamber, tear up your piston, your cylinder walls, everything under the sun can get wrecked from that. It is, if you look at this cylinder head, you can see all this discoloration in here. That happens from overheating. Most of the time these things, well, pretty much, I think every single one of them I've seen this happen. The engine overheated to cause it. So what happens here is the cylinder head is aluminum. The valve seat is some kind of hard iron. Breaks up. Oh, here's another one. Example I have over here. And you can see it a little bit better. It's not completely wrecked havoc though. So this valve seat is falling out. Now this was a reman head and they did it wrong. So this was not an overheating job. It was a brand new engine that hardly had any miles on it. But what happens, the aluminum expands and contracts when it gets hot and cold. The iron expands and contracts when it gets hot and cold. Well, the aluminum expands a lot faster than the iron does. So as it gets hot, the aluminum opens up and that iron don't fill in that hole as much. And it will pop out of there. Look at this guy, even had a broken valve guide in it. But see if that won't come out of there. But that guy, when it comes out, it smashes between the piston and the head. It disintegrates into 1,000 tiny pieces, causes that damage we saw in the other head. So do not let your engine overheat. There's some people will stake these seats in. They'll bend a little bit of the aluminum around there to help hold them in better. The later engines, they have a better fit and they don't do that. I've seen those engines overheat pretty good. And I cannot remember any of them that have actually had the valve seat drop out. So, hopefully, that'll cover that for you. And then, next, we're going to talk about the timing chain in the block. If you look at this right here, your timing chains can wear out the guides. There's supposed to be a plastic guide on here. And what happens is this chain starts rattling around in there once that plastic guide disintegrates. I've only seen this on engines right around 2009. And I believe there was a recall on it too on some of them. So this happens and you'll hear your timing chain will be slapping around and rattling in there. And that could be making a ticking sound. And one thing it's doing too is it's slamming this tensioner, starts jumping around. And all kinds of havoc breaks loose. This one ultimately ended up, I don't know if you can see that. You can see plumb through that engine if you get in just the right spot. This was some more of the stuff. This is what I found in the oil pan. And oddly enough, this engine was still running when I bought this truck. I bought this truck from the auction and I thought, well, I'm going to get to have cam and lifter's job, is what it sounded like. And it was pouring down rain, so I didn't crawl into there and look at it. I brought it back here. I put it on the lift and started checking it out. And I'm like, man, there is a huge hole in the side of the block. So I was trying to find out where the oil leak was so I could fix it while I was doing the cam and lifters. And funny enough, that camshaft that was in this thing and the lifters they look totally fine. I don't reuse lifters no matter how good they look because there's a big problem with them. We'll get to that in a little bit here. Almost sounds like a rod knock. If you're familiar with old engines, you'd hear your rod start knocking and you'd think, oh no, I gotta get a new engine. Well, those old engines, they had a piston like this. 318 piston right here. They drove 200,000 miles with lawnmower oil in them and stuff, and they were pretty much indestructible. So they went from these pistons to the new 5.7. This is a 5.7 hemi piston right here, an 03 to 08 style. And to make better gas mileage and more power to the wheels, they shrunk the size of the connecting rod. They shrunk the height of the piston. They made the ring lands tighter together. And that's all good and everything. That reduces friction, gets you better gas mileage, all that stuff, more power. But what happens is over time, these pistons, they start to wear out on the sides here. This one's actually not too bad of a piston. The anti-friction coating is just about gone, but it's not scuffed real bad. I can see the machine marks most of the way up there. Let's see if we can do that. See the machine marks? So what happens though over time, these pistons wear out. And because they are so short, this is a later 5.7 core engine I got sitting here I just threw it up here to make videos and stuff, cleaned it up a little bit. You can rock those pistons in there. Can you hear that in there? Now what happens, the reason it goes away, when your engine warms up, like I was telling you earlier on the valve seats, the aluminum swells up more than the cast iron does. And the piston runs hotter. So it swells up and it fits tight in this bore again and will not do that. So you start it up and you hear knock, 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 knock. And then once your engine's temperature starts coming up, that noise just gradually goes away. You won't hear that piston slap anymore. Now, it don't hardly ever cause any trouble. It has to get really bad before it's going to cause any trouble. It's just annoying cold start sounds is all that really amounts to. It's not super common on these Hemis, but it does occasionally happen. If you're driving a Chevy, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. It happens on those 5.3s, 6.0s, and all those engines. They were just horrible about it. Some of them I saw, even brand new cars, that you could hear that piston slap in them. So hopefully that'll deal with that one. Now the next one here, this is the most common sound, the common problem you'll hear, a tick in a Hemi. Pretty much everyone, if a Hemi comes in here and it's got 100,000 miles, 5 years old, you've probably got at least one of these. So if you'll bring me the exhaust stuff here, we'll talk about that one for a minute. These guys right here. Now thank you Ezra. These parts aren't exactly the ones that go together, but so you can see what's going on here. This is what goes on. See, we got this all assembled about like this. You've got a heat shield on here. And what happens is these bolts, and pretty much all the time, it's one of the end bolts here, or two, or three. I don't think I've ever seen all four broke, but I don't remember. I know I've seen at least 2 and 3 broke on these things. And so they'll be stuck in your heat shield like that. And if you're lucky, they break off like this guy did. You can take a pair of vice grips or something, unscrew that, your head's good, you're ready to go. You put a new gasket in there, put your head or your manifold back on, put this back on. Now usually they get stuck in here like this. You'll have, this one's not broke, but depending on where they break off, you'll have the nut and the top of that bolt will be together on here. And the way you tell when this is all in the car or truck, you just grab this back here, and if this corner is loose and wiggly, you got a broken bolt. Sometimes this corner will be broke, sometimes this corner, sometimes this corner. And again, it's because there's an aluminum cylinder head and there's an iron manifold, and the aluminum expands and contracts farther when it's hot and contracts more when it's cold than the iron does. So what happens over time, if you've ever taken a coat hanger and you bend that sucker back and forth about 500 times, it'll break because you exceeded the its elasticity point, and it won't bend back. Now, if you just take and move a little bit, it'll be fine. You can do that all day long. That coat hanger will never break. But if you go too far with it, bending it, it will break. So these bolts right here, and the end ones take the brunt of it. This head is going every time it heats up and cools off. This manifold is going. So that's bending these end bolts like this. Every time it warms up and cools off, warms up and cools off, it's bending that bolt. And eventually they'll break off. So it's not really a deal breaker, but the way you know this one is you'll start the car up and you'll hear it tick, 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 tick. And it will go away usually when it warms up. It's a slower tick than the piston slap was, and not as deep and dull sound. It's more of a sharp ticking, actual ticking sound. Now, the big trouble you get when you have that problem, well, look at this head here. This one's going to be a bit of more pain for me to fix. So this one broke off down below the surface. They can be a lot more tricky to get out. What I like to do is I take a little cutter on my Dremel, way smaller than this, but just so you get the idea, and you carefully cut a flat slot in the top of that. And usually you can put a screwdriver in there, a flat screwdriver, and unscrew that bolt. If they're from Pennsylvania, New York, places like that, they can be a lot harder to get out because they also get corroded in there. And then there's different ways you can weld a nut on there, put the nut on, weld in the center of it. I know one thing that helps too is if you can do it with it hot, because that aluminum, again, it's expanded more and it's relieved a little bit of the tension on that bolt. So if you cut your slot in there, and then if you get a flat screwdriver for me, please. If you take the flat screwdriver, you can take it out, but there's a little trick on there that helps a lot. So you take this and take it over there to the, and this one's a really good example of a bad one here. So the tips broke off of it, and it's rounded off. If you take it over to the bench grinder, and on the fine stone, just carefully file that perfectly flat so it has a nice sharp edge to bite into on both sides. It'll help, because when you use that Dremel grinder to make that slot, it's going to be like a U shape in the bottom. So it's going to be kind of hard to keep that screwdriver from popping out of that. So if you have nice sharp edges, it bites in there. And you can usually unscrew those. So enough about the exhaust bolts. We're going to go to the biggest, baddest problem of them all. The one you've all been waiting for. I got this little collection on the floor. It's probably taken me 6 months to save this mess up here. We got these lifters. They like to go bad and quit rolling. That guy is not rolling anymore. And what they do is it eats up the cam. That thing quits rolling. It's supposed to roll smoothly across there. It quits rolling and goes across there. So this was the last one I did. I got to save this one for a customer. I always like to let them look at it before I throw them in the pile. See what their particular engine looked like inside. So if we look here, I took all these cams and I marked the lobes. These were in my scrap pile. I marked all the bad lobes with green. Every single one of them has bad lobes. And they're not always MDS. It's not always the MDS ones that goes bad. It's just as often the regular ones. And the engine don't even have to have MDS. This one has MDS, but it was not the MDS lifter that went bad. That was a regular non-MDS lifter there that took a dump. And the way, there's also, some people say that it's the cam itself that causes the trouble. Because they will see damage like, here, let me wipe the green stuff off of that one. They'll see some damage like that, and they'll say, well, that cam is the problem. The cam is falling apart. There's a reason the cam falls apart. If you take these lifters and you roll them across some smooth glass, you can hear that lifter bearing going bad in there. And actually, you know what? Here, we can do that. Which one was it? So make sure they're lined up where they belong. It was this one here. And we'll grab one of these that doesn't look bad. See, that lobe looks good. So take one of these. And how do you like my desk here, what he made me? My kid made this for me. But if you roll these things on some smooth glass, it's smooth and quiet. That's the one that was on the good-looking lobe. And you can see the roller looks normal on there. It's shiny and smooth and clean. You get that where I can focus on it. Come on, you little turd. There we go. That one looks great, okay? So we'll put that one back in there where it was, right there. And then you got this one. It also, the roller, come on, looks great on that sucker. It's nice and shiny and smooth, no pitting or anything going on it. But I bet you, if we listen to this, hear that sound? That's not the piano. That's a sheet of glass there, okay? That's not the piano making that sound. That roller lifter is in the process of going bad. Or wipe it off on the rag here. Try to get it focused. The roller itself looks perfectly fine. But that sucker has been hammering on the cam. And it did that damage to the lobe. The lifter itself was the problem, not the cam. The cam, that sucker's hammering on it. It's supposed to roll smoothly like the other lifters did, but it's hammering on that sucker as it rolls, and that's where it's at the highest pressure, and it's hammering, eating away the cam. I am not one bit afraid to reuse a cam if I come across a good used cam and a core motor that's hydrolocked or something, because I do not believe that the cam is the problem on these. But that's the most expensive problem, most common expensive problem, is these suckers going bad. These go bad, they destroy your cam. And this is why. This is in the process of doing it. This one over here that's green actually ate it up. And you'll see any level of going bad on these here. See if we can see some. They're not showing up in the camera. What am I doing here? I'm not the camera guy. There we go. There's some bad lobes, bad lobes. There's a really good one. So some people will tell you that these plastic retainers are the problem, and they let go and they spin the rocker in there, or the lifter in there. Well, what happens is, like this one, it's going bad. This thing's full of them. See, that one's an MDS. The other one was not MDS. These things, as they're going bad, eventually it'll get to a point where this leg will catch onto one side of that thing, and it will spin it in there. There's no way that plastic can hold it once that's getting ate up. So there you have it. There's that. Oh, and I've got one little bonus video, or bonus tip here for the last hemi tick. Where is my cameraman at? And my filters. Let me bring you the filters, please. Okay. Now, these suckers, this is your generic ProTech Walmart, not Walmart, I think O'Reilly's is where I get these from. O'Reilly's oil filters. They look just like a Wix inside there. They got a nice drain back valve here that keeps the oil from draining out. When you shut the engine off, it keeps it all pumped up nicely. And then you've got I wouldn't want this thing for toilet paper. I don't know what they got this going on here for. But they've got just the paper goes over the holes, so they'll bleed down overnight and they will leak all your oil out of your system, so your push rods and everything bleeds down. And you can hear, it sounds similar to the exhaust leak. You'll hear a bunch of ticking on a cold start. It's because your Fram oil filter is a total piece of garbage, and they'll let unfiltered oil sneak around them. There's all kinds of reasons. And if you look at the pleating on this, I mean, it's not nearly as tight. It's not going to catch as much stuff. I won't run these on my lawnmower. So that's your last Hemi tick. Hopefully that addresses most everything that goes wrong with these Hemis, tick-wise, that you'll come across. There's probably something else I forgot. Just go in there.
Go in there. Go. Yes.
He's going in there. He's going in there. Oh, yes. We got him!
So fast. It was just like...